Why did you want
This
to
is
do
a
a
Baptist
talk on
church,
Grav?
Joe.
Huh?
Why did you want to do a talk on Grav?
You will find that out very shortly, sir. It's just cool, basically.
That's why we're
Have you used it?
It's so pretty.
I've looked at it multiple times, never used it.
All right, cool.
It's one of those things I look at. I was like, I want to learn another tool.
I feel like the only
We'll see.
thing that would
All right,
make
hold
this
on. Quiet real quick. We gotta.
Obviously.
Okay,
Oh.
you're live.
All right.
As long as my laptop says you're recording.
Yep. Cool. All right. So my name's Mike. I'm going to be talking about Grav CMS today. So first of all, has anyone here actually used Grav? Yeah? A little bit? Oh, okay.
After you said you were talking.
Nice. And you've heard of it. Anybody else heard of it? Or know something about it? Okay, a couple people. All right. Who here uses some sort of CMS on a regular basis? Pretty much everybody. All right. And who here knows or has played with a static site generator, Jekyll or whatever? Okay. Cool. So Grav CMS is a modern open source flat file CMS, and the two important things to note here are flat file and CMS. So flat file. What that really means is that there is no database, and the reason I think that's important is because databases really suck. Like, you got to deal with rollbacks and migrations and importing when you're setting up a local environment and setting up your database config and figuring out importing from backups whenever something goes wrong. And that really annoying thing where it's like, I see some text on the sidebar, but I don't know if it came from like a widget or a block or like this node or whatever. And I'm a little biased because I come from Drupal, which is like the, Satan's butthole of databases. It's like the site I'm working on right now has like 600 database tables. So Drupal is a really bad example, but really any CMS that uses a database is going to be annoying for its own reasons. So that's why flat file I think is interesting, and the other part here is CMS, right? So like when people hear flat file, they always think it must be a static site generator because that's what static site generators do. They have flat files. That is not what's going on here. So even though it feels a lot like Jekyll, and we're going to get into this a little bit when I start demoing some stuff. Even though it feels like Jekyll, if you've ever used Jekyll or other static site generators, it's not, because it actually is a CMS. There's a full admin. You can have back-end processing. You can have form submissions. You can send emails. You can do anything that a regular old CMS with access to a back-end language can do, which you can't do in a static site generator because you only have HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So basically, it lives in this cool middle ground between CMSs with databases and static site generators. So you kind of get the best of both worlds there. So what I'm going to do today is, one, I'm going to demo a pretty basic Grav site that I built just to learn it. I'll show you the front end and also the admin, and then we'll look at kind of the code base and how it's put together. And then the second thing, if we have time, which I think we should, is to actually add a small feature to it so you can see sort of what Grav looks like to develop on. So the website is savageadulting.com, which is the hardcore guide to growing up, you moron. And the idea here is that I am the idiot who thought that it was worth $10 to buy this insanely stupid domain to make this insanely stupid blog. So I've got two posts, one about why you should create a budget and another about what to do when your baby won't sleep. So basically this is like your basic blog. You've got post listing, you can click a post, you can scroll, see the content. Got this categories page. So if you're viewing a post, you can see it's got tags here, very fancy, and you can view them by category or by tag. It's got a search form, which is something that you can't easily do on a static site generator because you don't have access to a backend. So if I search for like money, then I'll see a result. It's got an about page, which is literally just a gigantic GIF. And by the way, I am going to say GIF instead of GIF, and if anyone's upset about that, then come find me afterwards and we'll talk. That's actually going to be,
It's all for a fight.
I'm going to say it like 100 times later because that's a big part of the presentation, so just get ready for that. Request. So this is like your basic contact form. What's your name, email, something, submit it. and it sends me an email and says, thank you for your request, I'll be sure to throw it away immediately. Another reason I built this site, by the way, is just to insult people. It's just my favorite thing to build, insulting sites. And the RSS feed. So, basic blog, right? Regular old blog features. So what I'm going to do now is show off the admin a little bit. And the way that I'm going to do that is not by logging in to the live site, but by cloning it locally, just to kind of show you guys how easy it is because it doesn't have a database to set it up locally, and then log in there. So I have this Git repo, which any of you can clone if you are extremely bored. And I've actually already done this over here. So I'm inside the cloned version of the repo. Since there's no database to set up or import or point to, everything is stored in the codebase. So literally all you have to do to run it is a single command, which is to open up PHP's built-in web server. Or you could just dump it in the doc root of Nginx or Apache or whatever. So I'm just going to run that command, which is php-s. I'm going to set it up at port 8000. And the only kind of gotcha here is that you have to point it to system/router.php because that's the way that Grav is sort of built. So run that. It says it's listening on port 8000, and I'll switch back over here. Get big. Are you tiny? Okay. Localhost, and there is the site. So I mean that's really all there is to it. Just a single command to launch the server or dump it in a doc root somewhere, and you're ready to go. There's nothing else to set up or configure. The only difference between local and the production is that it has this little debug bar at the bottom, and I'll show you guys how that's enabled. So, got it set up locally. I'm just going to pull up the admin section and show you guys what the Grav admin looks like. So here we are at the dashboard, just kind of what you would expect, for a regular old CMS. Everything so far, by the way, besides the setup, is just regular old CMS stuff. We'll get to the Grav specific stuff soon. So, like I've got a little button to update it. I'm not going to click that because I know with absolute certainty that it would blow up everything since I'm doing a live demo right now. But if I did, then it would just, on the fly, Ajax-y, update the files and tell me that I'm updated. And the nice thing is... Do what? You can't. Well, you could. Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is the nice thing is that once you're done updating, since there's no database migrations or anything, all you have to do is git push and then git pull on production, and then production is upgraded too. Alright, so dashboard is there. I'm going to mostly focus on these two, configuration and pages. This beer is delicious. Configuration. So, two important things that you need to know at a basic level before you can really use Grav. Before you can use Grav as a developer. One is that you need to have a pretty good understanding of YAML, and the other is just Markdown. So if you know YAML and Markdown, you can go pretty far. So you can see here, this says right at the top, the save location for this form is this file, system.yaml. And I will show you exactly what that looks like when we get into the code base. But this is just regular old, CMS configuration. You can set the home page. You can choose the default theme. I only have one theme to choose from. You can choose if you want to process Markdown in your content and or process Twig in your content. Date formatting stuff, language stuff. It supports I18N, custom headers, Markdown options, caching stuff. I didn't mention this before, but it is PHP based, and it's built on top of things like Twig and Symfony components, and it uses Doctrine for caching. So it's got some fairly modern technologies under the hood. And then over here in site config is just your regular old site title, default email, all that kind of stuff. So for example, if I change the name to Savage Adulting 2 and saved it, and then went over here, you would see it's immediately updated. So unlike a static site generator, there's no sort of build step in between that you have to generate the site. It's just it dynamically pulls from your config files in your Markdown. So that's kind of the basics of configuration. Media is just all the media types that you accept, and info is basic PHP configuration stuff. And then pages. So this is some more basic CMS stuff, really. I mean, it's just regular old pages. You've got subpages here that you can click. So one important thing to note about Grav is that Markdown is really kind of closely baked into the way Grav works. So instead of this being a WYSIWYG, it is a Markdown editor. It kind of looks like a WYSIWYG and feels like one. For example, if I choose or select something and then bold it, then it actually does appear bolded, but you still have to deal with these asterisks.
Do you know what editor they're using?
I don't. Is it Mark It Up? It might be it. No, it's actually Code Mirror. Interesting.
Code Mirror.
I did not know that.
I couldn't find a good Markdown one. So.
I didn't even know that Code Mirror supported Markdown.
I'm assuming it's that rocket bolt.
So there is this little eyeball button so that you can switch to preview mode, but just keep that in mind. Like, you can't necessarily easily pitch this to a very non-tech savvy client because they sort of have to understand that Markdown isn't super scary to use it. So if I were to create a new page, like if I wanted to, not there, go back. If I wanted to add a new blog post, quit getting small. Then I would just go add page. I'll change the parent page to the blog so that it shows up in the blog listing, and then just choose that it's a post page type. And we're going to talk about page types in a little bit. And then I'll just say this is my post. Auto-generates the folder that it's in. And continue. Got a title. This is the body. We've got some, do you want to publish it? Do you want to publish it in the future? Do you want to tag it with stuff? Just normal options there. Save it. View the site, and there is our post. All right, so that's the Grav admin. Now, what I'm going to do is kind of look at what it looks like behind the scenes. How am I doing on time? Okay, cool. So can you guys see that on the left sidebar there? Is that big enough? All right, cool. So really the most important thing to note here is that pretty much everything that you do is going to be inside this user directory. Everything else is basically Grav core, aka do not touch. And even within the user directory, most of what you're going to focus on is pages or possibly some config. So I'm going to go through these one by one, though, just to show you what's going on here. So accounts, one user account for me. It even has the hash password right in there. I'm super admin, login, whatever. Config, so every one of those config forms that I was showing off earlier directly maps to one of these files. So for example, in the site config, since I changed it to Savage Adulting 2, if I go here to site.yaml, you'll see that it updated the file. And then if I update the file and save it and refresh the form, then you'll see that it changed to 3, because all that the form does is a one-to-one mapping between the file and the form. And one interesting thing to note here, by the way, is that you don't even need the admin to do anything in Grav. In fact, when you download Grav, there's even an option to download without the admin, because you can do all the configuration and content stuff just by editing YAML and Markdown. So, like for example, for me as a developer, I would rather just do it like that. I just have a desktop Markdown editor and edit everything there. All right. So down here.
Did you just say you're editing YAML files because you like doing that?
You don't like YAML? I love YAML. What do you like, JSON?
No, I was just saying like you would rather do that than do it through the user interface.
Totally. You can grep YAML files. Yeah, you can, like, if you want to know where your site name is, I could just grep the codebase for Savage Adulting, and there it is. All right.
Quick annoying question, like a detail you're not even covering. Is there like where does the server get pointed to so you don't access like that YAML file so somebody can't go like grav/myconfig.yaml? Where does it do that?
What's that? It's down. It's right here at the root. It's just like server permissioning. I think it's actually an HTTP access that disallows all that stuff. I want to say.
I was just curious.
All this stuff here.
Config for Nginx too.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Is they have this when you download Grav, it comes with this web server configs that you can kind of use as a sample. So you can just like copy and paste this to your Nginx, and it has all the configuration you need for it. Yeah, I don't know. It's also in the docs, which by the way, the docs are awesome for Grav. The best technical docs I've seen in a while. But yeah, I don't know. I guess people just like to be able to CP and they're done. All right. So moving down the list here, data is basically anything that you need to store. I'm only storing contact form submissions because that's all that my site accepts, you know. But any just kind of arbitrary data that you need to store in whatever format you want, you can stick here. Localhost. So this is interesting. So Grav does support site-specific config. So earlier when I showed off, where is it? This little guy down here, this debug bar. The way that that is enabled is by having this localhost config system.yaml, which sets debugger enabled to true. So you could enable or disable or change any config based on environment just by having, you know, like I could create another directory called savageadulting.com, and that would be production specific. And then pages. So what's going on here is going to be really familiar to you if you've used Jekyll before, because it's basically the same idea. So you've got directories and you've got markdown files. And each directory can have subdirectories which also have markdown files. So for example, the blog has a default.markdown, which means that if you go to /blog, it uses this markdown file, and since it's named default.markdown, it maps that directly to this template, default.html.twig. So the file naming is actually really important here. So for example, on an actual post, which is named post.markdown, that maps directly to post.html.twig. And actually what I can do is, if I wanted to create a new page type, I can just create a twig file for it, and Grav recognizes that. So if I wanted to create like beans.html.twig, I want to create a beans page type. Then once that's created, even though it's completely empty, if I go over here and add a page, then beans is an option because it recognizes that there's a template for it. So on the fly page type creation just by creating a template, and then I can even create like, here is my beans page. Continue, get rid of that. I'll say like this is content or something. Save it, and then if you view it, it's going to be empty because the template is empty. But if I add, let's say I steal this out of it, a different template, and post it in here, and then refresh, and then there it is. So, you know, in like, what was that, like a minute, we added a new content type and a new template for it and created content within the content type. And from then, it's just a matter of beefing up your Twig templates. All right, below this, well, actually, I was back up here in pages. One other thing to note is that if you want to add media to your page, what you do is you drop it into the same directory as the Markdown template. And then when you're in the admin and you're viewing it, it shows up in this little guy right here. And you can also upload from here, and it'll just create it in the directory behind the scenes. Plugins. So, you know, same thing as WordPress plugins or Drupal modules, same idea. And that's also shown here on the plugins page. You can update on the fly here as well. And on getgrav.org, there's a nice little UI for browsing and searching plugins and all that kind of stuff. And the last thing is just themes, which I already showed off a little bit. You know, it's mostly just Twig. I've got some Sass happening here. There's a little bit of configuration. I literally just have enabled to true, but you can do whatever kind of configuration you need in your theme. And you can also do some PHP stuff, which I'm not using at all. And that's really it for the code base. I mean, that's, you know, how my site is built. It's just some plugins, some configuration, and some pages, some markdown, and the theme. So now what I wanted to do is create a really simple feature. So have you guys ever been to like thecodinglove.com? You know, those like meme sites that have a title and just a GIF underneath. Here comes GIF again. Yeah, so I'm going to do exactly that. Like, instead of just having title and body and, you know, like having an actual post, I want to allow just title and GIF. So first of all, I'm going to do that kind of at a code level without updating the admin, and then I will show the admin how to know about this new field that I've kind of created. So let's go back to pages and create a new post by just creating a directory. Where's new directory? New directory. I'll say GIF test. And I'm going to still keep using the post page type, so I'll just name it post.md. In this new file, all I have to do is give it a title in the front matter here, and I'll talk about what that means in just a second. And then that should be enough to make it create. Yeah, so it's already showing up just because it exists under blog, and I have my post.md, which has a title. So by the way, the anatomy of a markdown file in Grav. We'll look at it kind of a beefier one here. So you've got this little section at the top, which is actually YAML inside of a markdown file. They call this front matter or headers, depending on who you ask. So if you go to the docs here, you can see that there's really a lot of options for stuff you can stick here. You know, there's slug, there's menu if you want to have a different name in the menu system than it does on the page itself. There's date, you know, like whether it's visible or not, whether it's forced SSL or not, if it redirects, like all kinds of stuff. But one thing you can do is create your own. So if you've worked in a CMS before that has custom fields, I work in Drupal mostly, which has, like, every site has millions of fields, it seems like. This is basically Grav's version of doing that. So in this case, I'm going to create a field called GIF and just reference a GIF so that I can know behind the scenes, like, okay, this post is related to this GIF, so let's display it. So literally all I'm going to do is just GIF : and then what I need to do is grab a GIF and stick it in this directory. So lucky for me, I have these fun educational GIFs preloaded here. So I'll just drag one over, and that one I just dragged was baseball.gif, so just baseball.gif. So doing just that does nothing because I haven't told Grav what to do with that information. So what I need to do is I need to go to the theme and display it. So down here, themes, savage, templates. The blog listing is a default.md, so I need to look at this default.html.twig. And you can see that all it's doing is just looping through for posts in the collection of posts and doing teaser.html.twig on each of them. So if I open up that one, this is what I need to mess with. So what I want to do is, instead of always displaying this summary, I want to ask, is there a GIF for this post? And if there is, then display that instead. So I'll just do if post.header.gif, because everything custom that you stick up here, it's referenced inside post.header. So if I had, you know, whatever is something, then I could reference that by outputting post.header.whatever. So in this case, it's called GIF, and if I have that, then, well, let me just add the else in the end, and if, okay. So if I have that, let's output like test. Refresh. Okay, so we can see this post has a GIF. So we know that we have a value here. So now we just need to display it. So the way that you reference media in Grav, and this is, you know, there's a lot of kind of twig helpers in Grav, and this is just sort of one of them, is post.media, and then the name of the file, and then .url. In my case, it's named baseball.gif. We don't want to hardcode that, but I'm just going to do it temporarily just to kind of show you, and then we'll make it dynamic. So if I do that, we should start seeing the GIF. Oh yeah, so the URL for it. So we need to do like image source. All right, so now we should start seeing the GIF. All right, I forgot that's what it was. Okay, I should change the title for this. Is this like performing a DB rollback or something? There we go. All right, cool. So, but we don't want to hard code it, right? Because, you know, the whole point is that we want to be able to just use whatever is listed here. So what I can do instead is just use the value from here, post.header.gif. Put that there, refresh, and we should still see it, and it's working. So we added, like, in 5 minutes we added a new field and are displaying it. But that doesn't really help us for the client, because the client doesn't want to come in here and, you know, edit YAML within Markdown. So we need to tell the admin how to know about this. Because right now, if I go to /admin and view the page, then you can see it exists in page media, but if, for example, if I added some other ones, they would also exist. Oh, great, one's too big. Are they both too big? Yeah, they're both too big. Well, whatever. If I added more than one, then you would see that they also exist here. So you need a way to kind of choose which one you're talking about. So to do that, we need to add a new field. And in Grav, a field is called a blueprint for some reason. So what I'm going to do here is just new directory and user called blueprints, and new subdirectory called pages, because we are specifically editing a blueprint for a page type, and even more specifically, that blueprint is for the post page type. So I need to create post.yaml. So it's empty right now. What I'm going to do is just literally Google Grav blueprint. What in the world? Grav blueprint. Yeah, and just get the example off their docs and copy and paste and modify. So again, we're talking about YAML. Even when you're changing forms, you're still just using YAML. I'll name it posts. This is just some boilerplate. You can extend other types of blueprints. Like we could create a new one after this and extend this one that we're creating right now. But right now we're just extending the default. So down here we've got the tabs, and their example uses the advanced tab, which is this guy. But we actually want to mess with the content tab. So I'll just change this to content. And their example overrides a field, which we don't want to do. We want to add a new field. So I'll just delete the overrides part. And all I have to do is just name it the same thing that it's named in my YAML. So YAML does GIF. I'll just name it header.gif because it's GIF field in the header. I'll delete this validation stuff and choose a GIF. So refresh, and there is a field that already is pulling from Markdown. That's it's nice, but it doesn't really help us because it accepts arbitrary values. So you could type like GIF2 and save it. So what we really want is a way to select from the page media. So lucky for us, Grav has a field for that. Grav actually has a lot of useful custom fields, which are listed here. So like date formatters, file pickers. The one that we want is page media select. So just show me a list of all of the media for this page and let me choose one of them. So all I have to do is change type to page media select, and where am I? Refresh, and then it's got this nice little drop down, and I only have one media here. Yeah. But if I had more than one, then it would list them all here, and I could just choose which one I wanted. And again, just changing the value here would then drink break.
Ready when you are. Give me a good clap.
Changing the value here would just change it on the Markdown file in the YAML. So, I mean, what was that, like 30 minutes? We cloned a Grav site, we learned about how it's built, and added a new feature to it. And that's really it. I mean, all I would need to do to push this feature to production is just git add, git push, and git pull on production, and it's there. One interesting thing to note is that, like, a lot of people have questions about keeping content in sync. So since content is in the code base, what happens with content that is added to production? How do I, get that back locally without being able to clone a database and stuff? There is a plugin for that is one of the really widely used ones called Git Sync. So what this does literally is every time a content change is made where this is enabled, it just commits and pushes, just right off the bat. So you could just git pull to get all the latest content from production. And a nice thing about this too is that since it does it every time content is changed, then you can use Git as your revision system for content, like for workflow strategies. If somebody makes a mistake and needs to revert back, you can just git checkout, commit, and git push, and then that'll be reverted back. So Yeah, I mean, I think that's really it. That's I just kind of wanted to show off the basics of Grav. I didn't talk it much about, well, at all about PHP. Grav plugins are PHP based. You basically inherit from the Grav plugin class, and then there's all these events that you can hook into and do whatever you want to do. And then themes also have a lot of power there too, which again I actually didn't do anything with yet because I didn't have any need to. But extends theme, so there's a lot of theme functions that you can override or hook into. So that's it. We have.
By any chance that get sync plugin lets you select a branch? So for example, I could have content maintainers pushing a bunch of stuff to a branch, and then I can just bring that over to my dev branch. In order to not constantly have to pull from it because it's probably content changes and not I'm making plugin changes or whatever.
Yeah, it does. When you're setting it up, you can choose which branch you want to automatically commit to. So you could create like a content branch if you wanted to.
So from that, how does it handle? Okay, I didn't define this field, but my template is expecting it. Is that mostly up to you as the template designer?
I didn't define this field, but my
So
template.
if I have a baseball.gif in there,
I'll take it.
and I don't say how to handle that, it just ignores it.
Oh,
If I have
right.
a piece of content that doesn't have that field.
Yeah.
So I retroactively add a field. In the database, I add a column. That column is now on every piece of content. Presumably it's null unless I set a default value to it.
Yeah. So I mean, just make sure you're writing your templates in a way that says like if there's a value for this field, and that's all there is to it. Because I get
more Mongo or CouchDB.
Yeah, exactly. It's very kind of document oriented rather than relational. Like you could have 10 different pages, each with 10 unique fields that are only on those pages if you wanted to. That'd probably be bad architecture, but it's possible.
See, like then or switch statements.
Yeah.
Which is not nice, but
Yeah, so you're not constrained by like what all the other pages have. Any page can have whatever the heck it wants to.
A good segue question I had, so Drupal 7 with like features and Drupal 8 now is pretty heavily YAML based on configuration. And I remember CHX, one of the top Drupal guys, was really promoting like Drupal probably would work really well as a CMS with Mongo or one of these object-oriented databases in the back end. It seems like this thing, if you did everything it's doing, but you actually store the data part in a object-oriented or document-based database, then you kind of have the best of both worlds, where you have all this flexibility to configure things like you want, but then you can still have a legitimate database to serving it up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you're basically making everything a YAML file, and a YAML file pretty much looks like a JSON object or whatever you're going to look at in Mongo or some of these other databases. So it's almost like if Drupal, one of the existing CMSs that already does a lot of this stuff, just said, like, oh, that's a really cool idea. What if we just took what we already do well and then took what this thing does well? And you can do a bunch of stuff really well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be really interested to see how this would pair with Couch specifically. And, like the replication aspects of Couch are really similar to GetSync, for example, for Grav. Because Couch is like such a pure document-oriented database. That would be cool.
Just out of curiosity, do you know how the slug system works, like internally? Because you change the slug in the file. So the wrong way to do that, right, is to basically say, hey, I need to go scan every page in there and find which one matches the slug.
Oh, like how the code is written to parse it?
You said you could change the slug in one of your pages or whatever.
Uh-huh.
As an example,
Yeah.
how does that actually get stored away to where it's efficient?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, performance in general, right, is an issue for people because, if you're having to if you have 1,000 pages, you don't want to have to parse 1,000 markdown files on every page request just to figure out how to build the menu or something. So one part of that is that the Grav caching system does a really good job of.
So it's a cache. Okay.
It does have cache internally, which is.
That's enough of like an internal index of all the slugs and just kind of.
That's exactly what it does. Yeah.
Okay.
And it does a good job of keeping track of these 999 files haven't updated since the last time I built the cache, but this one has, so I need to rebuild for that one. So it just stores all that stuff up here. And I mean, it uses Docker and cache, so you can use memcache or Redis behind the scenes if you want to, instead of just file-based too.
So it watches.
Yeah, it watches
page
modified
sh-
time.
mod-
Mhm.
Okay, it watches modified time and it looks at that and says, hey, you modified, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna index away your slug on some sort of line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean the same thing kind of applies to the
Is it
search
rebuilding
systems.
the cache when you build the content, or is it rebuilding the cache when I access the content?
It rebuilds the cache on when needed to build a page, as opposed to when content is saved, because it doesn't know what it needs to be storing in the cache until it's requested. So yeah, so that is a good point though, because I would not recommend, like Grav is really nice for like small to medium sized sites, which are like 95% of websites or something. But when you're talking about hundreds or thousands of pages, it's probably just not the best choice because of things like that. Like it
So
just
multiple content editors.
yeah. If you another big thing that it doesn't do well is like editorial workflow. So needing like an approval process, and Grav, the file either is published or it's not. So there's no like save it and then it emails this person and they need to approve it. So yeah, some complex CMS features or high performance stuff would not be a good fit. But yeah, for the majority of sites, I would say it's really pretty nice and kind of refreshing. The thing I really like about it is that
If you can do a Redis cache, though, I mean, performance-wise, high performance.
it still needs to see if it needs to reload the cache for each page, though. Like it needs to check the modified time for every file.
So there's no like build stuff where it builds out like the static version of the
Mm-mm.
website.
Yeah, I mean, you might as well just be using Jekyll.
It still has a router, and that router is going to be constrained by the date timestamps and the sheer number of files.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, since it is still dynamic, can you include like actual like PHP like processing of files?
Yeah, totally. You could write a plugin to do whatever the heck you wanted to.
Yeah, it sounds like if you have performance issue, then you can figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
So in WordPress land, the W3, or it's WC Total Cache, or whichever one it is. There's two big caching plugins. One of them is Total Cache, and it basically makes a static copy
Mm.
I think
of
that's super
each.
cache.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So it makes a static copy. So you render the site, and it basically generates, when you hit that page, it generates an HTML static copy. And so then it's like, oh, hey, I have that. And it just routes you to that HTML copy instead of doing any processing of the page.
Yeah.
So I imagine there wouldn't be too terribly hard to put a plugin in place
You
like
could
this
pull
that
that
would
I mean, if
do the same kind of thing, where it's like, hey, go to the cache folder and insert this HTML file. Don't do any PHP stuff.
it depends on what's on the page too. Like if you were just viewing a post, then all the cache is only going to need to check one file for that to see if it's updated. But if you're viewing like the home page, it needs to sort by date. So if I go change one of the dates to be newer, then it needs to like go through all those. So for simple pages that aren't listings or anything, then it is going to be really fast. But pages like this can really slow down when you get a ton of posts.
I think that's where like this would hit its bottleneck is things that if to say the YAML files or the JSON, if they sort of decided to use that format, or in a database, some of those issues they'd be a lot more scalable because the database is better for that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm imagining like this to me looks a lot like what Drupal to me looks like on the back end, where it was like all your configuration gets dumped into these YAML files. But I guess in an effort to not have 8 million tables in your SQL database and trying to do configuration stuff, and then they still make the mistake of having 600 tables because you build different post types and every field becomes a thing. It's like, well, if you just used a document-based database for your YAML files and your content files, then you really have the best of both worlds in that. You could still use a Drupal type of system and pull from a database instead of a flat file.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I thought that was very appealing when I first heard that. Like coupling Mongo with Drupal, I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense because most of the stuff you want to configure, most of your content is just kind of whatever you come up with. So why not have it
Yeah.
I want to see Drupal just basically steal all this stuff this thing's doing and put it in a Mongo type of database. Like, there you go. We're good.
Now would be.
We're scalable and you get all the benefits of like YAML type situation.
Yeah. Yeah. You'd probably have to fork it to get anything like that to ever happen. But actually, now might be a really good time to fork Drupal. With all the craziness that's been going on in that community.
Now's a really good time for just a new CMS in general.
Yeah.
That's like not Drupal or WordPress
Joomla.
built off of.
I heard this thing
before.
called TypeRocket is really cool.
It's not CMS.
That's a segue.
It should be
That's
its
a
own
segue tool.
CMS.
Grab it.
It will be one day.
I've predicted all the frameworks are trying to become a CMS and all the CMSs are kind of trying to become a framework. And like this is kind of a middle ground piece that I think somebody could look at as like, oh wow, this is a pretty cool idea that is literally like to me this is in the middle of what Drupal does well and like what it doesn't do well.
Mm-hmm.
So something this wouldn't handle well, I'm assuming, is like, let's say I'm like, hey, let's put a comment form on a post.
It actually does that surprisingly well. It just stores the comments as YAML in that data directory. There's a plugin for that.
So if you're Tumblr and you have 5 million people posting a comment,
Yeah, I mean, if you're
How does
Tumblr,
that
I wouldn't be
handle
using Grav.
right? Like at a certain level, concurrency is going to be a problem, right?
That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying, if you just change that, you save in your YAML into a document that supports YAML, then it's a data or a document database, then it's a
Well,
database.
in a database, it's different because I'm storing each comment as a separate entry indexed to the original post. Where I'm assuming these are fields. I guess you could architect it as they were separate YAML files.
Each comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember.
Either each YAML file would your post would have a field or a series of fields or something that were comments, or you would have a series of YAML files. In which case, if they were all individual YAML files, as long as you date timestamp them with like an IP address, you'd probably be okay.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly if it's. I want to say it's one YAML file per comment. So I mean that is just a plugin. You could do whatever you want, but
Then that would be fairly. Obviously, there's a limit there.
yeah,
Hard drive write speeds, but
yeah. Like all it does is just create them inside the directory of the page itself that they're commenting on. So there's like a comments subdirectory which is just full of YAML files
gotcha.
of that page. But I mean, again, that's just a plugin that some random guy wrote, so you could write your own that stored them as a single file if you wanted to.
Sure.
So the real question is, could this be used relatively easy to import and then now host videos from Mike.com?
Definitely. I think there's actually a Tumblr to Grav plugin.
We should do it.
You just add a YouTube field here.
So 5 years ago, Mike sends me like videos at least once a day.
Yeah.
Weird shit on YouTube. 5 years ago, I decided to start collecting them into a Tumblr. And so it's videos from Mike.tumblr.com. And it's just no matter what it is, everything he sends me, I immediately, that's the rule, I have to post it. And in fact, in 4 more days, we're celebrating
It's
my
your
5th birthday.
submission process. Is just send it to him.
I mean, we're talking about thousands of videos here he has added to this dang site.
Oh my
Or
word.
like, this
It's
is,
funny though, you can look back at the archive like this, and you can find out which months he was not productive in.
yeah, the months that I was really busy.
Archive
Is,
is larger than usual. There's some statistical analysis on like, what did Mike have time in his hands?
yeah, there's also Twitter you can follow now that Steven just set up, so take notes. I forgot about that.
Oh, geez.
We'll talk about that after the recording's off.
Who are the two followers? Is it Stephen Wade?
What's that? I think that's me and Steven probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Recursive.
After 5 years, I've been complaining about it. I still have yet to build like a Chrome plugin where I can easily hit a button. And, like, upload
He's
it.
had to copy and paste like 1,000 times for this.
Think how much work you could save every time Mike pastes me a link, post it.
We do have some loyal followers though. My brother-in-law will complain if nothing new gets posted to the site on a regular basis.
It's like, Mike, I haven't seen any new videos.
It's like, I'm so bored, you gotta post something. Anything else Grav related?
I think it's pretty cool. I like.
So
Typically, the UI for that kind of stuff isn't very solid, and it looks like they spent a lot of time.
It's nice, yeah.
Yeah, making it to where at least when you're working with it, if you wanted to use the admin, it's not like you're getting sick of it instantly.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's compelling because it makes you think about saving all your configuration, all your content in really like a document idea. And it's like, well, if that shit works on a file system, why not just put it on a file system that's really good, which is called a database? And then you have literally like a really cool CMS that's flat file based instead of it's on a document based database.
Yeah, I've never looked into it before, but I'd be surprised if there weren't already some pretty decent like Mongo-based CMSs out there. They kind of follow the same idea.
I wouldn't imagine it would be terribly difficult to add a driver to just use a different file system, aka a database.
Yeah, if it's built nicely, which I would hope that it is, then you can probably just add like a service decorator or something to just swap out the way that it processes content.
So, security-wise, how do you feel about this versus something more traditional CMS? Like, is this more or less? Is the age of this a problem when it comes to like security type things? Or
The age?
it's relatively young, so Drupal and
Oh,
WordPress are fairly hardened because thousands of people have whittled away at the available number of bugs.
Yeah.
And so, like, to exploit a really good WordPress plugin, either you need a really crappy plugin, or you need something that's older. You need a lot of combinations, and you need a series of vectors to sort of make that happen.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume that something that's a little bit younger probably doesn't need as many vectors to sort of execute a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that's tough to say, because like everything seems secure until it gets hacked.
Sure.
One thing I would say is just by nature of not having a database, you exclude a lot of super common security breaches. You don't have to worry about SQL injection or things like that. But there's always the chance that there's some critical flaw in the login or something.
Cool. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Seems like it leverages stuff like Twig a lot, so a lot of your attack surface would be like, what's wrong with Twig? If there isn't even such a way
Well,
you could hack that.
user input's always your flaw, right?
Yeah. I'm just saying, like, if
Advantage here is you can roll back.
a lot of this stuff gets compiled down to things like Twig templates, then you're in the same problem with like everybody else that uses Twig for their framework, which means it's probably pretty damn secure. Everybody else uses the same thing.
Drupal and Craft at least.
So to get this to run locally on a server, you pointed it to something like server, but you some PHP file, right?
That's only if you're using the built-in PHP web server. I did.
System/routes.
Yeah, that's a long way to scroll up.
I ask because your index file is outside of whatever that is, right? So like, is the admin interface accessible like via the basic web root, or do you have like a separate web server running the admin, or what?
The admin is a plugin, which every request, including admin requests, all go through index.php, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So admin basically just adds some routes, same as anything else would.
So why did you have to point to the router instead of
That's just a quirk of the way that the PHP built-in web server works. You wouldn't have to do that if you were actually hosting on like Nginx or Apache or something.
You do that so you can load static files. Otherwise, all your static files get loaded. So you can do it if file exists. Don't redirect.
This seems kind of odd that they chose to like, use AT access to block all these directories instead of just moving your index.php into a public directory like some of the other frameworks do.
Yeah, that isn't.
Like, what if somebody creates a whole other directory that's not explicitly blocked, and then it's all of a sudden exposed to the internet.
Yeah.
They block all of them, but they only open certain ones. Instead, default.
Oh, I was gonna say their default config is probably the only file you can access from any of those web server configs is that index.php. Because the user that's running the index.php needs to access those files, so it has to have permissions to put it
It
in.
have to be the
They don't
assets
need
and
to be
images
web
and
accessible for it to proxy them to.
It have to be your page and post images and media and all that stuff. Isn't it?
Not the
Yeah.
proxies and-
So what happens? I see your images thing. Is that just for your template? Like, what happens with your page media? Like, is it still like when it's being loaded? Is it the URL of it still down in that?
Yeah.
file?
It just points directly to the file,
Okay.
unless you're doing something. Yeah.
That makes sense.
So it just points directly to the file and file system, unless you're doing something like resizing it, in which case it would point to the resized copy of it.
It reminded me of a question I had early on, which seems like it answers that is everything just relative URLs? Because one of the reasons I don't like WordPress is that it lets us save absolute URLs places. And it seems like that, like with Drupal, if you pull it to your localhost / Mike, it doesn't care that it's in Mike. It just kind of renders everything correctly.
Right.
WordPress, if you put it in a subdirectory, or then you're in a subdirectory and you roll it into no subdirectory, you always have to go like run some stupid ass plugin to strip all the /Mikes out.
Yeah.
So it seems like, I guess you didn't do that because you didn't have a subdirectory, but do you know, is everything is relative, like it's not trying to save /Mike subdirectory?
Grav itself does a fine job of that. You just have to make sure that you write your templates so that they don't assume that there's no subdirectory. Because if you do like image source equals / and then some, path, then that would screw up if there's a subdirectory. But yeah, that's, Grav itself does a good job of that. I actually, when I was first playing with it, I threw it in a subdirectory and didn't have any trouble.
Yeah. It's like, how did they not fix that?
I still don't understand why WordPress insists on canonical or URLs instead of like relative. Blows my mind. Whatever.
I'm kind of confused with this. What are you talking about? Like you have to do /
If you create a WordPress post and you're like okay, link to my home page here, and you put in like a WordPress default link. WordPress does not link to / it links to domain / or whatever that path is.
Or if you develop a site.
And so that means if I develop on localhost, all my URLs are localhost /.
Well, worse than that,
Which means that I have to do a find replace in the whole freaky database.
if you develop on dev.kevindeves.com / new website, and then you go migrate that to newwebsite.com, it wants to put new website, newwebsite.com / new website.
Yeah, outside of the new URL and WP home variables, like you still have to go find replace all of your content where you put that URL in.
Yeah.
It's like this.
WordPress is great about, instead of fixing the problem, they write plugins to fix problems with plugins, and then you need a plugin to fix problems with plugins.
I just use WP CLI, and it's
There's some good
great
find
search
replace
results.
tools, but the fact that we're still hard coding non-relative URLs is the problem. Like we could have fixed that all the time.
Yeah, it's cool that they got fixes for it. It's like, why not just fix it?
It's open source, man. You can fix it.
Well, if you can get approved, if you can get
But it's so
approved,
much easier to bitch about it.
Any other grant questions?
Are we about to be out the second time cycle on that camera?
Any other questions?
All right.
Anybody? Anything else to offer up?
No, I'm good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.